If you really want to gain velocity in getting people to back you in whatever you want to do, you have to engage them in the process. What we always want to strive for is to exceed others' expectations and not to disappoint people. But what we're also striving for is how to maintain our velocity and how to make sure we're working on the right tasks that move us forward. So the secret to gaining velocity and influence is to engage your audience. Many of us today are feeling out of sorts. We are in a period of flux and not sure of our future. Today is only a point in time in our lives. How we handle this difficult period will impact our overall performance in life. Are you letting this tough moment negatively impact you, or are you using it to create breakthrough thinking on what you want and need to do to win the marathon of life? Now, you're taking some quantified risks which will help you gain velocity. Good afternoon and welcome to this week's session of Velocity Mindset Success Stories. You're in for a real treat today. We have one of the leading futurist speakers in the world with us today, and he's a good friend of mine. His name is Daniel Burrus. Now, he's a global futurist. New York Times has referred to him as one of the top 3 business gurus. And quite frankly, he's simply the smartest guy I know. He's an active entrepreneur who's founded 6 businesses, 4 of which were national leaders in the first year. He's a New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, including 7 books, his latest one being The Anticipatory Organization. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to invite Dan to share with us the concept of futuristic thinking and how that will add velocity to your lives and your businesses. So Dan, let me ask you first one simple question. When you hear the word velocity, what comes to your mind?
Well, you know, most people think it's all about speed and going faster and faster. But the last time I was flying on a jet coast to coast, the pilot did not go as fast as possible. Actually, that wouldn't have been efficient for fuel, and it would have burned out more of the parts. What they found was what I would call a strategic velocity, the ideal speed to accomplish without burning out the plane. By the way, many times we burn out our organization just like you could burn out a plane because we think it's about fast, fast, fast. Now, I love your title. It is indeed about velocity. Right. As a matter of fact, let me plug this for all my followers. I love this book. Go out and get it now. Quit waiting. Come on, get to it. And look at this, mindset. Ron, just give me a second. Let me talk about mindset for a second. I've been traveling around the world for almost 40 years now, working with all sorts of different companies and organizations and leaders. And what I've come to believe is it's all about mindset. It's all about, this is the game up here. So if you can elevate your mindset, you can change your future. So congratulations on the book. Again, I consider it a must read. Get it.
Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate that and your recommendation. And you're right. You know, when most people think about velocity, all they think about is speed. And then they're doing a lot of things that are not leading to where they really want to be. And then they get the burnout you talked about. The physics definition is speed with direction. You got to have that direction. And that's what you're about, because when you're talking about futuristic thinking, you're doing what CEOs have to do. They have to start thinking about the direction of the company and where to position the company for great success. But the challenge is not many people, Dan, have that trait. In fact, when we do assessments, for salespeople and for leaders of organizations, one trait that we look for is the trait of futuristic thinking. And believe it or not, Dan, only 16% of the population who have taken this assessment have what we call a well-developed area in the concept of futuristic thinking. Tell us, how do we deal with futuristic thinking? How can we get that 60% up to 60%, if you will? And how can we simplify it for the people that are listening to this presentation today so they can bring futuristic thinking to their organizations?
Okay, a couple of quick things, and thanks for that. It's a great question. First of all, there's no shortage of trends. There's never been a shortage of trends. The problem is which ones are going to happen and which ones aren't. And since it seems to be like a crapshoot, a lot of people don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, because general thinking, and I found this with the CEOs of the Fortune 10, much less the Fortune 50 or 100, much less smaller companies. And that is, other than death and taxes, you can't predict the future. Of course, I would say, well, after winter comes what? And we know that the stock market will not go up forever. It'll go down, but it will not go down forever. And in 2030, can an astronomer tell you the exact moment we'll have a full moon in March? In other words, there's an amazing amount of things we do know when you know where to look. So what I've done, Ron, to help people understand this is that instead of me saying, I'm the only guy with the good trends, throw everybody else's out, I did something my clients have found is more powerful, and that is a way to separate what I call the hard trends based on future facts that will happen. They're going to happen, versus the soft trends that may or may not happen. Those are based on assumptions versus a future fact. And when you put them into those two categories, all of a sudden you start to be able to see some certainty in a world that seems to be uncertain. I'll give you an example very quickly in a second, but let me give you two big ones here on this. Number one, all trends are either hard or soft. Either they're based on a future fact or an assumption. And so if you're ever talking about a trend, which one is it? And then secondly, the other big one is a trend by itself is boring. Now, Ron, you actually heard me say that. And you know I've been talking about trends for almost 40 years now. Trends by themselves are boring until you tie them to an opportunity. The minute you attach a trend to an opportunity, it bursts into actionable life. So I don't want to hear you or your friends ever talk about a trend unless you say, and by the way, here's the opportunity for you, or here's the opportunity for us, because then you're going to start to use that trend to your advantage. So, what is a hard trend? What are the opportunities of hard trends? They let you see disruptions before they disrupt, so that you now have disruption as a choice, because you're either going to be the disruptor or the disrupted. There is no in between. And actually, disruption is not a hard trend. It's a soft trend when you know how to separate the two. It gives you a choice. And the other thing is problems. Most of us wait until we have problems and then we crisis manage out of them. But most of the problems that you will have a year from now, most of them, based on surveys I've run, are fully predictable right now and therefore avoidable.
So what would be an example of a hard trend and an opportunity it could be presenting for somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are three very quickly. By the way, one quick one, because we want to jump on hard trends, but soft trends, the opportunity is if you don't like them, you can change them. Okay. All right. So, for example, increasing healthcare costs. Been going up for a long time in the United States. Now, people would say, well, that's a hard trend, and that's what politicians think. That's why their reforms are all around how do we pay for the mess the baby boomers are going to cause as they get older, and the costs keep going up. Instead of realizing, no, it's a soft trend, and technology can be used to dramatically lower the cost. For example, blockchain could be used to create transparency, trust, more security. You would realize that artificial knee you were getting put in, it can vary in price by 500%, even if it's by the same company in the same size. And that's why an aspirin in a hospital can cost you $20. If you knew that, you'd have your spouse bring it, but you didn't know that. But what if you could? We could bring costs down because competition would go up. So back to your question. What about the hard trends then? Well, there are three categories. In other words, hey, hard trends isn't that hard. And that is, there are technology hard trends. For example, after 5G, is that it? No. By the way, could you tell me what it's going to be called? Probably 6G, right? No, not a probably. They'll be calling it 6G. I can even give you features of it right now. And we're putting more in the cloud. Is the cloud getting full? No. And if you don't like AI, can you make it go away? No. But you can use AI to your advantage, knowing it's accelerating exponentially instead of just not liking it. So technology is one of three. Another hard trend, demographics. In this country, we've got 68 million baby boomers. By the way, the number was 78, but 10 million have passed away. They're not on the other side of life and the young end anyway. We got 68 million baby boomers, hard trend. They're going to get older. And there are many predictable problems and opportunities that we could either let those problems happen or we could pre-solve them. For example, let me give you an example. A lot of people love to go boating. They love to go fishing. But as you get older, it gets kind of hard to launch the boat. It gets kind of hard to get in the boat. So what if you and I created the easy launch trailer for seniors? Would we have a demographic that would give us a growing market if we did a good job of designing it? Well, yeah. Would we know which countries to export to? Well, yeah, absolutely. So, Istanbul, average age 28. I'm not going there. Japan, I might go there first. In other words, wow. Low risk ways of innovating when you use hard trends. The third category will freak everyone out there. Government regulations. And you would say, what? How can that be? Well, you can't predict all government regulations. True. I don't want a list of things I can't predict, all the things I'm uncertain about. What I want you and I to have is a list of things you are certain about that you can act on. For example, are we going to get more regulations on cybersecurity? Well, yeah. Why? Because there's some hard trends at play that politicians can't ignore, but they'll debate a lot of other things. So instead of what don't I know, what do I know? And you'll see those three categories, regulation, technology, and demographics being huge drivers of certainty. And
well, this is fascinating. So what would you do if you were a smaller manufacturer, let's say catering to the military industry, and that's also based on government spending. And now it's hard to tell, depending on which party is in power, which one's going to spend and which one's not. So how do you predict that in the future if you're trying to figure out, what you want to invest on in your company?
Excellent question. And by the way, I am a advisor to the Joint Chiefs, and I'm actually on the Futures group at the Pentagon. So I've got some insights I can give you on that. So the number one is you need to think beyond politics. And how do you do that? You find the hard trends that are certain to happen. You see, again, uncertainty doesn't empower you.
Right.
Certainty does. So are you certain of nothing? Now, from a speaking, now I do consulting and speaking. And out of the last 1,000 speeches I gave with an average audience size of about 1,000, do the math, it's a lot of people. I have at the end had them all write down one, hard trend certainty they knew would happen, and a related opportunity. In other words, I had them all write that down, and then they submit it to me. I do an analysis. If there's some soft trends in there, I move it into the soft trend pile, and then I send it back to the entire audience so they can see what they created. Because again, each individual is only writing one, but in reality, if there's 1,000 in the audience, they got 1,000 hard trends. I've been collecting a lot of them. You know what? There's thousands of certainties. Oh my God. You think there's like 4? You think there's like 10? There's thousands. So if you're a small manufacturer, think about, what do we know about automation? What do we know about robotics? What do we know about blockchain? What do we know? For example, Ron, when we were in the last recession and I was writing Flash Foresight, not my latest book, but the one before that, I decided to start a company while I was writing it based on the principles of the book to see how good the book was, with 2 rules. I would not spend any money and I would not hire anyone. And by the way, I was busy because I gave close to 100 speeches that year, and I was writing a book and I was consulting. It wasn't like I had nothing to do.
Right.
And I developed 2 apps because that was a hard trend. Would we have more apps? Now think back to 2009 when the only business app was how to convert metric to feet. And I came up with one app for the military to relate to this question. So I developed the first mobile app for the military, and it was a emergency response app. And I designed it for Fort Leavenworth, Texas. Why? biggest military base on planet Earth. If they liked it, I figured others would like it. I had a problem. I wasn't a defense contractor. I was just me and my company. And it would take a long time to get through that. But one of the principles I teach is to take your problem and skip it. So I found a defense contractor that already qualified and used them as a means of partnering with them so that the app could be distributed using all of their credentials. And it did quite well. So what I was doing was I was using hard trends because I thought to myself, does the military, are they looking at, remember 2009, is the military thinking and looking at mobile apps with smartphones? The answer is yes. Is anybody developing any apps for the military? Well, look in the Apple Store. What do you think? No. So will they? Will they? Is that a hard trend or a soft trend? Well, no brainer. If it can be done, it will be done. If I don't do it, someone else will. Bingo.
So just taking this down a little deeper, and for everybody listening, if this is not your industry, don't worry about it. Just use the same process for the industry that you're in. Going back to that small manufacturer in the military, you know, they're selling, let's say, to the Navy or whatever, and they're creating this equipment, right? Are you saying that maybe they should also be thinking about developing an app on how the Navy can be monitoring the equipment that they're using, that gets them out of just a machine for a certain amount of money and adds to the value proposition?
Well, that's why you have been successful, because you already know the answer. And it is absolutely true, because we sell a lot of things, but it's not the thing, it's how you use the thing that creates the value. And we usually we expect you to come up with creative uses for it. I'm just really good at making high quality things that I sell you. I've seen that over and over in the defense world. But if I'm giving you something on how to maximize its use and impact, you know, I could even charge more for that. So the answer is yes. And it doesn't have to be an app. That's one way to do it.
Okay. So in terms of the three strongest or the hard
trends,
if you will, what would be the top three right now that we should be aware of?
Well, if you're looking at again, the business world, look at things like, let's pick AI, for example.
Okay.
Growing huge, and there are different colors and flavors to AI. So most of us, especially when we're mid or smaller sized business or a manufacturer or whatever you're in, would say, well, you know, only the big guys can do that.
Right.
Wrong, wrong, wrong. It's called, one of the things that we have is virtualization. You got software as a service, you got hardware as a service, you got AI as a service. And you have companies like Amazon, for example. I'm just giving you an example here. They have said with Alexa that for free, you can use their multi-billion-dollar supercomputers for free. And you can train Alexa to work for anyone you want to answer questions, customer service questions, and so on. So if you're a defense contractor and you had a product, or anybody, it doesn't have to be defense contractor, why don't you have some keywords designed around the Alexa, give them one of those technologies, you know, one of the Amazon things, and say, hey, if you got questions, just ask it using the keyword and you'll get the answers. And if it can't answer you, it'll contact us and we'll be on the phone with you to give you an answer. In other words, you're using AI and you don't have to own it.
Right.
How do you program it? Skip the problem. Hire a kid. And if the high school kids are too expensive, try the elementary school kids.
Okay. What else would you consider are hard trends that we need to be aware of today?
Well, we've got, let's go back to demographics. Predictable. We've got a lot of people retiring in your organization. So let's give you a trick, hard question, soft trend question. We have many people in your organization will be retiring, taking their knowledge and wisdom with them. Now, when you hear that, you say, boy, is that a hard trend or a soft trend? Let me give you a little bit of a thought on that. When you have an and or a comma in a trend statement, there's probably two. So the first part of that, a lot of people will be retiring in your organization, by the way, hard. And, hint, now it's soft, they're going to take their knowledge and wisdom with them. Well, that is soft. You could develop, do you have a knowledge base? Do you have a wisdom base, or do you only have a database? Do you have a mentoring program? And if you, in other words, to capture some of that. So by separating the hard and the soft, you can see what you can act on to take advantage of it.
So that's really powerful because, I can tell that when some of the CEOs I deal with that are not in the Fortune 100, they're worried about today and tomorrow, let alone, 2 years from now. But what they're all worried about is losing that intellectual property when those people retire, that knowledge. And what you just said was mentorship, something that anybody could be doing is a key way you could be taking on that trend and protecting yourself against that.
And Ron, let me just tag onto that to say, now I like us to think bigger about these things. And by the way, you do that in here. And to think bigger about that, let me give you an example. I was talking to a young guy in San Diego where I live, and he had a new PhD in biotech, and he just got a job about 6 months ago in a biotech company in San Diego. And I said, I asked him, I said, do you have a mentor? And he said, oh yeah, I've got, yeah, for sure. And I said, well, but he said, well, I got more than one. I said, oh, you got more than one. Do they work in the same department as you? And he said, well, actually, I've got 5 mentors and only one works in the same company as I work in. One of my mentors is a customer, actually. Another one is a distributor. And he went through these different windows, and they were all mentors. And I said, well, how often do you see them? And he said, oh, I talk to each one of them once a week. Once a week, yeah. By the way, he was using Zoom and things like that way before the pandemic. And he said, boy, am I learning fast. Now I'm going to stop there. Did I just change how you're thinking about mentors and what mentoring is? You see, when you dimensionalized the whole thing, it was like, wow, never thought of it that way. Well, we're in the technical world, but guess what? We're in a human world. And when we think a little bigger about these things and connect on a human level and do things that humans do best rather than what AI does best, you know what? You're going to have a bright future.
Now, when that guy was answering you about a distributor, was that one of his distributors? Was that a customer?
Well, he had a distributor of his products.
Yeah.
Which was different than his end customer. Because remember, as you know, because I know you're a sharp business guy, anytime you can help a customer with their customer, you're going to win.
Exactly.
So you think a couple of notches out.
But no one would ever have thought about whether it's the distributor's your customer, or the end user, to look at a customer as a mentor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's brilliant. I've actually done that myself. I didn't even think of it in these terms, but I remember something didn't go right in an engagement that I had, and I called up a VP of sales for a big company because he was a good friend of mine. He was my client, and he goes, hey, we all go through this thing. He gave me 2 bits of advice, and it led to a huge breakthrough in my business. So absolutely.
Well, with the time, we don't have a lot of time, and I know you got some more questions, but I'd love to give one action I'd like people to take, and then let you respond to it and tie in the velocity mindset to it.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
That in there. Because if you're just listening to us and you don't know what to do, it doesn't help you. Here's what I'd like you to do. I would like you to, in your calendar, mark 1 hour a week in your calendar. Why? Because if it's not in your calendar as an appointment, you'll be too busy crisis managing. But this is about opportunity management. And in that hour, I'd like you to unplug from the present, because your present is more related to the past than the future.
Right.
You're not going backwards, you're going forwards. All right. So in that hour, I would like you to ask yourself, what am I certain about? What are the hard trends, the future facts I know will happen to me in my career, to me in my business, and if you want to really get good, to my customers? And remember, what is the opportunity? And when you do that, you'll get a list. But big lists never get done, because I got an opportunity list, because we have exponential opportunities right now, which means exponential money to be made if you take a little look at them. But you need to know what they are. This is a way of identifying them. And here's what I'd like you to do. I'll refine it. Pick one, and remember, it's now based on a hard trend. It's an opportunity. If you don't do it, someone else will. So the cost of the no is more expensive than the cost of the yes, giving you a way to move forward. And that's how you can increase your velocity, because now you're accelerating with intent, and you're directing your future rather than passively receiving it as it unfolds.
This is brilliant because, number one, in the book, as you know, we talk about you have to work as much, not as much, but you have to put a fair amount of time on the business versus in the business. Everybody's in the business, firefighting and doing everything else, but they're not working on the business. That's what you're talking about. But here's a challenge that everybody has, and I think you may have solved it. You're talking about identifying the hard trends. And when you can identify the hard trends, then it becomes easier to find the opportunities with that. What happens though when you get stuck? Because one of the things that I hear from a lot of people is when I say, what do you want to achieve? What do you want your destiny to be? They say, I have no clue. I don't know where to look. So where do they look for these hard trends? How do they get unstuck?
All right, let me give you a principle. And I haven't written much about this, so it'll be a new one for people out there, okay? And that is, abundance brings scarcity, scarcity brings abundance. So when you can, what do you want to do with your life? Well, there's so much, you got a scarcity of ideas. But when I make you focus on something and reduce it to a scarcity, you'll get abundance of solutions. So in this case, I would like you to narrow it down to one area of focus. And by the way, in your book, you've got a whole thing on focus.
Yes, we do.
Absolutely, because it's so important. So when it comes to focus, I would like you to focus on either a client, a product, a service, your business model. Pick something and then look at, okay, what are the hard trend future facts around that? Because if you're looking at everything, you'll come up with a scarcity of nothing. If you're looking at one thing, all of a sudden you'll get an abundance of ideas and say, wow, look at what I created here.
Now, here's a layup for you. You're into a lot of research. I know that.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So you probably have research on hard trends, right? Where can people access that if they want to start learning, from people who have analyzed this, more than they have, and identify those hard trends and even soft trends? Yeah,
well, a completely free resource for everyone is if you go to burris.com, my website, and look at my blogs. Now, I've been writing one blog a week for many, many decades. And actually, for about a 12-year period up until 2 years ago, I was writing 2 a week. Now, we're talking thousands that have been published and are out there. Well, I've got a search feature. So on the blog, so just search up subject. Pick hard trends, pick soft trends, pick whatever you want, and you'll find examples right in there. So there's one thing you can do. Secondly, I think one of the reasons I've got over 1 million followers on LinkedIn is I'm doing a lot of sharing of these stories. Connect with me on LinkedIn. So there are some ways. On a more specific, obviously I would like you to pick up a copy of Anticipatory Organization, my latest book, where I get into how to do this, give you practical how-tos with examples. There's plenty of resources for you.
But the bottom line, I think, Dan, is what you're saying to everybody is if you really want to gain velocity in life and in business, if you don't take time on the front end to think about the future and to think about the trends, whether they're hard or soft, then you're going to be wasting a lot of time doing things wrong or going down the wrong path. And you could have saved yourself that time and you could have had that competitive advantage. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Too many of us are just letting the future unfold because we think it's all uncertain. And I don't think you're going to like your future if you do that. What I'd like you to do is to be actively shaping a positive future for yourself, for your family, for your career, for your business, and for your customers. That means being engaged. And what I'm bringing you today is there's something called the science of certainty. And when you have certainty, Ron, you have the confidence to make a bold move. When you have uncertainty, you're stuck. So let's get unstuck. Let's have new levels of confidence and let's make some bold moves because they actually have low risk when you're using hard trends.
That's a great way to end this. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you understand the value and the brilliance of Daniel Burrus. I mean, I just got a couple of ideas just from listening to him for 25 minutes. And I always get ideas every time I call him. But now you can get those same ideas also. So if you go to burris.com, You'll get into the world of Dan's mind and all the things that he's predicting, and get the Anticipatory Organization book. You need to be in Dan Burrus's mindset, because if you are, I guarantee you will gain velocity. Dan, thank you so much for spending time and your ideas with us today.
Thank you so much, Ron. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And that's today's Velocity Mindset Success Stories. Go out there and make it happen. Remember, there's two ways you can get there, the slow way or the fast way. It's up to you. So find out what you need to find out about your trends and make it work for you. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.